Grazie, grazie mille dell'invito, del contesto, della possibilità di presentare una ricerca in corso che in realtà va avanti da alcuni anni su Celio Calcagnini. Parlerò in inglese per essere più inclusivo, so I switch to English. The talk is about this author, Celio Calcagnini, a Ferrara humanist, partially known to historians of astronomy. I say partially because he doesn't belong to the canon of mathematical astronomers. He was no mathematical astronomer, but he was an educated, a cultivated humanist with philosophical, natural philosophical interest, with interest in knowledge theory, and especially in astronomy, and that's why he engaged with astronomical topics, including a small text on the motion of the Earth, a defense of the motion of the Earth, that was written in the 20s of the 16th century, a fact that makes this text particularly interesting, since it was published, or he was written, not published, in the time in between the composition of Copernicus Commentariolus, so the first draft of Copernicus' mathematical astronomical proposal, and the publication of De Revolutionibus. I have no strong evidence of the relation between Calcagnini and Copernicus, but the context speaks a lot about their possible contacts. So I will emphasize and stress the possible connection, given the fact that they belonged to the same environment, that they studied at the same universities, they had the same contacts, and I'll just report about possible connections between the two, while focusing especially on Calcagnini's work. Can you show the slides, please? So, okay, in my talk, I will give you I will say a few words I already did about the text that I'm interested in, Quod Celum Stet Terra Autem Moveatur. It's a text about the fact that the heavens stand still and the earth moves. As I said, a source in the history of cosmology that needs more attention, in my view, on which I've been working with my colleague Alberto Bardi. We've been producing a translation. The translation is already there. We hope we can publish it soon. I will say something about Calcagnini, so very brief information about his life and work. I will especially expand on his philosophical perspective on the topic of his text, of his long essay or short booklet on the motion of the Earth. Discuss the issue about the motions that he attributed to the Earth, which is a very tricky one, as you will see, and then present some general remarks. So this is the text on which me and Alberto worked. It was published posthumously in 1544, that is 1 year after the publication of Copernicus' De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium, as part of a larger collection of works by Calcagnini, opera aliquot, some works. It's a very heterogeneous collection of humanistic, literary, philosophical works by Calcagnini, on which I will say something. The text is partially known to historians of astronomy. In the 19th century, some scholars became particularly enthusiastic about this work. For instance, so all Copernicus scholars, Franciscus Hippler called Calcagnini a Vorläufer, a precursor of Copernicus, for the evident fact that he was one of the first to defend the motion of the Earth in the Renaissance. And Ludwig Antoni Birkenmeier, the Polish historian of astronomy, stressed the fact that Calcagnini and Copernicus belonged to the same network of erudite scholars, the same res publica literarum, if you want to call it like that, of diplomats and men of science in the time. So the likelihood of a contact and an exchange between Calcagnini and Copernicus was already very present in the scholarship on the history of Copernican astronomy in the 19th century. Some more scholarship has been devoted to Calcagnini, among others Michel-Pierre Lerner. I'm not going to discuss now his interpretation, but if you like, later on I can say something about that too. We have a problem of dating this work. So I put in the title circa 1518. This is the date that historians of astronomy generally accept as a likely date for the composition of quadricelum stet. Franco Bacchelli, who published transcription of the Latin text, stressed the importance of this dedication of the essay to the diplomat and ducal secretary of Ferrara, Bonaventura Pistofilo, as an element to reconstruct the date of the writing of the text, because Calcagnini and Pistofilo were in very close contact in the years 1518, 1519. We have no conclusive evidence of it, but we have a terminus ante quem, that is the death of Pistofilo himself, who died in 1533. So whenever the date of composition of this work is, it must have taken place before 1533. So the relevance and interest of this defense of the motion of the Earth is therefore intact. So this is the letter, the printed letter of dedication of the text, which is then followed by the quadricelum stet, in which, just to anticipate some interesting elements, we find what I would call, allow me the approximation, this statement about a Copernican principle. I quote, Hicetas and Archimedes, so these two ancient authorities, mentioned also by Copernicus as relevant authorities, believe that the heavens, the sun, the moon, the stars, and the rest of the higher things are stationary, and that nothing in the world moves except for the Earth, which, as it turns and twists around its axis at maximum speed, so we have the axial rotation, itself accomplishes everything that, if the Earth were stationary, would involve the motion of the heavens. Let me anticipate that the terrestrial, the daily rotation around the axis is not the only motion that Calcagnini ascribes to the Earth. There are other motions. I will come to that later. First, something about this person, Calcagnini. So born 1479, died in 1541. He is connected to Ferrara, one of the most important cultural centers of the Renaissance, one of the places where Copernicus studied and got his title in canon law. Calcagnini himself studied after Copernicus canon and civil law and got a degree from the University of Ferrara on the same subject. So in 1514, less than 10 years after Copernicus, Calcagnini received his title from the University of Ferrara. He then became canon of the Ferrara Cathedral, so the same or very similar duty as the one that Copernicus had in Varmia. Calcagnini became secretary to Cardinal Ippolito d'Este, and that brought him to develop a large network of correspondence and diplomatic contacts. He traveled with him to Hungary, to Eger, where he started very close interactions with an important astronomer, Jakob Ziegler, as is evidenced also by Calcagnini correspondence. Just to mention the breadth of the network that is witnessed by his correspondence, by Calcagnini's correspondence. He had among his correspondents the mathematical astronomer Ziegler, Ercole d'Este, Ippolito d'Este, that is the establishment of Ferrara, popes like Paul III, and Erasmus of Rotterdam. And the connection with Erasmus is quite important. Calcagnini was part of this wide European network of humanists to which also the Varmia circle of Copernicus belonged. So again, there are intersecting patterns. Calcagnini knew Poland he reports about Poland in his letters, and he spent some time in Krakow in 1518 when Sigismund and Bona Sforza married. It was one of those occasions in which many Italians and many humanists visited Poland. It's a very important context also because this is another place where Copernicus studied, with which Copernicus was in contact, and it is the place where we know that the Commentariolus, that is the first draft of Copernicus' work, was preserved. So historians have supposed that this occasion, the occasion of Calcagnini's visit to Poland, might also have been instrumental to his access to Copernicus' draft and astronomical theory. The opera Aliquot, as I said, was published posthumously in 1544. So a few words about opera Aliquot, that is this collection of texts in which Quod Caelum Stet is comprised. It's a very complex and rich collection of texts. They range from poems to court orations, diplomatic discourses, a military report on the conflict between Ferrara and Venice in 1509, an essay on navigation, a treatise on cultivation of plants, and summaries of philosophical works, including Aristotle's Ethics, Politics, and De Senso, some texts on Egyptian culture, erotic magic, and many texts on moral issues, De Patientia, De Concordia, De Calumnia, De Salute, small treatise on ignorance, a sort of oniric fable on ignorance that connects to a topic that I will soon address, skepticism and the role of skepticism in Calcagnini's knowledge theory. Let me mention that there are also works in rhetoric and aesthetics, a text on De Imitatione dedicated to Giraldi Cinzio, a famous humanist. Calcagnini was also in contact with Ariosto, just to mention another important tie of his. Keen interest in language, he wrote on words and their meaning, the verborum et rerum significatione, and on theological issues. Theological issues are particularly important because Calcagnini's endorsement of Erasmus brought him also in contact with him, and he sided with Erasmus in the controversy of Servo Arbitrio. So in the controversy with Luther, Calcagnini was clearly on the side of Erasmus on the issue of freedom. So as you see, it's a wide range of topics that give you the sense of a full-fledged humanist. Apart from his culture was also mathematics and astronomy. But I think it's important to stress the wide conception of culture and the arts in his work. Therefore, I propose you a quotation from a text that is connected in, that is part of the collection, Quod Studia Sunt Moderanda, so a small text about the liberal arts that gives you the idea of the interconnectedness of all disciplines. So a really humanistic understanding of how the disciplines should be studied and conceived together. So the liberal arts, Calcagnini writes, are indeed so conjoined with each other that without the support of each other, they are unable to stand. That is why the Greeks call them an encyclopedia, the circle of the encyclopedia, since they are kept bound together in a circular sphere as if embraced. Indeed, it is not possible for someone to learn one of them without the support of the others. So think of it. So all the liberal arts belong together. Geometry with arithmetic, arithmetic with rhetoric, rhetoric with grammar, etc. Each requires the support of the one next to it and akin to it, and needs to be enlightened by the rays of the others. Therefore, we are wont to collect them under one name, either philosophia or humanitas, or humanity. So this is really a sort of humanistic manifesto. This is in the background of Quod Caelum Stet. So what is the perspective, what is the approach of Calcagnini in this booklet? So it has a very complex humanistic style. It alternates Latin and Greek. There is a lot of Greek expressions, a lot of Greek quotations, a lot of references to the classics, and a clear philosophical legacy. That's the legacy of a very specific form of Platonism, which you get immediately at the entrance of the text. So Quod Stet starts with these words. Have you not heard that in the ancient academy it was thought concerning things and the entire nature that nothing can be understood or comprehended with certainty? So this is a very strong skeptical stance. Such doctrine, Calcagnini writes, is mere incipiens, ignoratio, or at least something like incipiens. Calcagnini doesn't stop at that. So it's so to say, the skepticism about the senses permeates, gets through his whole work, but the point is a Platonic one. Once we get rid of the illusions or the appearances, we can get to the rational truth, and we can, that's his point, we can defend the motion of the Earth only on the basis of rational arguments or at a philosophical level that goes beyond the immediate evidence of the senses. So in a way, he addresses one of the problems that Copernicus leaves implicit in his work, how to make the cognitive step from the direct evidence of the senses that Earth doesn't move, and a different level, a philosophical or a scientific level, about the reality of the cosmos. So Calcagnini says we have to go beyond the senses. That's how he introduces the topic of the terrestrial motion as a skeptical, let me say, Platonic line of argumentation. Some might ask me, after he produced many examples of the illusions of the senses, so along the skeptical line in philosophy, what such a long speech is aimed at. To make it clear, he says to you that, so he's writing to his correspondent, that you should not trust your eyes to the point of accepting as convincing and established what they tell you. I told you that this celestial sphere, the ambitum, which you believe to be revolving on itself at unspeakable speed, and this sun and those stars, which you think to be involved in a single circular motion, are not only stationary and enjoy perpetual stillness embedded in their spheres, but also in truth this earth, which you believe to be fixed and motionless, so your sight deceives you, does not stand still, or at least by the weight of its matter, as most believe. So goes against the evidence and against the established opinion. To renounce the evidence of the senses is both a scientific requirement, a cognitive requirement, and a moral one. Calcagnini quotes Gorgias by Plato, malum maximum hominibus opinio falsa, so a wrong opinion is the worst evil. He also quotes a line that all scholars in Copernican studies know well. Calcagnini is possibly the first one who brings forward this line by Virgil to make the plausibility of the motion of the Earth possible. We turn away from the harbor, this is the English translation, and the land and the cities turn away. So this is the kinematic principle that equates the motion of the Earth from the point of view of the phenomena to the apparent motion of the skies. And the ship metaphor, which is presented here on the basis of Virgil, will go through the whole literature on Copernican matters, from Copernicus himself through Digges, Gilbert, etc. So what does Calcagnini tell us about the motions of the Earth? It's more than one. He defends the daily rotation. That's the main point of the text. The daily rotation is what he argues for. He also addresses another motion, which I'm not sure how to call. We can call it an inclination or a libration of the axis. It's the variation of the heat of the ecliptic during the year, which is attributed to a motion of the terrestrial axis. So these two motions are the two most clear motions, but then we have references to the trepidatial theory, that is the other motions that were supposed to be proper to the sphere of the fixed stars of traditional astronomy, And what about the annual revolution? So what about planetary theory apart from spherical astronomy? So let me say immediately that it's controversial. There are different possible interpretations, but I think to address the more complex phenomenology of the heavens given the motion of the Earth, we have to focus on the passages in which Calcagnini discusses the sun, about which he praises its excellence, therefore immobility, and I quote him, "Often, as I contemplate the perennial nature of celestial things, I am amazed by the greatness and brightness of the eternal light," this is the sun, "to which nothing less befits than motion, and of all kinds of motion that which is called circular." So the excellency of the sun excludes the possibility of its motion. The sun is also the apparent motion of the sun is also related to seasons and to distance. We have a passage like this. From the sun, nourishment is given to animate beings. There is a vitalist background here. From these, the years and seasons follow one another. So the seasons depend on the sun, certainly not because the sun sometimes departs from us and then turns back, which is common opinion, but because we sometimes approach it and sometimes turn away from it. So let me mention the fact that this is my translation from Latin. Of course, we should look back at the Latin passages. Sometimes a conditional or the choice of one word can make a difference in interpretation. So the translation itself is a very delicate aspect of this work of interpretation. But you see, anyway, this context in which the sun, its excellence and immobility and the production of the seasons is addressed as a relevant topic for the motion of the Earth. So what about planetary theory, which is what would need closest to the Copernican revolution, if I can call it like that? We have a passage like this. It's about hypotheses, about mathematical models. What shall I say, asks Calcagnini rhetorically, about the trepidation of the eighth sphere? What shall I say about the motion of the various epicycles and deference? Here you are, the planetary theory. Although all this, as Proclus said, was induced hypothesin as a hypothesis by recent authors, nevertheless, they were accepted and approved with great consensus of mathematicians by those who found no other way to prove the various aspects of the universe, and what of them, what they call tough phenomena. What is that? What is inherent in the Earth, they nevertheless attributed to the heavens with supreme conflict of mind. So all those phenomena can be brought back to the motion of the Earth. That's what he says. It doesn't explain the theory. So then we are left alone with our conjectures. We can maybe resort to Pythagorean discretion. Calcagnini says, if the supporters of the terrestrial immobility will privately present to me some explanation regarding these topics, he says, I can bring you equal arguments against you. So I can face all of the arguments, but I will do that in private. Then I promise that I will do the same in good faith, even by taking an oath. So that's all what he says about the planetary theory. So there is an openness, I would say, but there is no conclusion that can be drawn from these premises. Calcagnini also discusses many reasons and arguments. I brought them together, reasons and arguments. They are not at the same level, but for the sake of brevity, I collected them together here. Reasons and arguments for the motion of the Earth. Whatever these motions are, they should be explained and defended. Very important element is self-preservation. So there is a teleological vitalist element in nature. All imperfect, corruptible bodies have a tendency to self-preservation, like sunflowers looking at the sun, like a magnet. So we have these famous metaphors of the later Copernican debate already here, with plenty of references. There is an excellence argument, the one that I already presented. the sun or the heavens are less likely to be moved because they are more excellent than the Earth. The Earth is like an animal, and like an animal, it moves towards its self-preservation. We find what has been called the Achilles argument. The speed of the rotation of the Earth on its axis is way less than the speed of the celestial sphere, so that's one more consideration. The background, what I would call the background argument, the fixed stars are the background, so it's less plausible that the contained thing moves than the container, if I can say so. Sea tides for Calcagnini, like for Galileo, or for Cesalpino after him, are produced by the motions of the Earth. And then he presents a lot of mythological arguments, arguments taken from mythology, quotations from Hesiod, from Virgil, from Mimnermus about the sleeping sun, etc. So we have plenty of rhetorical decorations to this text. So getting to my conclusions, I can leave the discussion about the Copernican connection, but I think those who are familiar with Copernicus see the familiarity and importance of the common background of these authors. The classical references are often the same. There is even this passage that I thought is really evidence of an exchange between the two. If you look at these two texts, Calcagnini's text, Quod Coelum Stet, and Copernicus' handwritten annotation to his Uppsala copy of Pliny's Natural History, you see that it's one-to-one, the same text. The problem is that both texts are derived from Cicero, so they are using the same source, the Academicae Questiones. The interesting aspect is that they both distort the name of Hicetas in a similar manner. It's not Hicetas, it's Nicetas and Nicetus in the two authors. So Cicero is used as one authority to point to classical or ancient ideas about the motion of the Earth, among which Plato's Timaeus plays an important role. So since time is short, I leave other considerations for conversations later. Some conclusions. First, Calcagnini was received in the Renaissance as a relevant author in the debates. I just present you this letter by Cesare Marsili to Galileo. Sorry, it's in Italian. Marsili writes to Galileo in 1625 to thank him for introducing him to Cesi and the Lincei, referring to the poet Mimnermus, the Copernican poet Mimnermus, according to Calcagnini. So you see this mixture of Copernicanism, references to ancient authorities, and to Calcagnini as a vehicle to find evidence and authorities for the Copernican question. So Marsili mentions the poetic furor and the cogency of mathematical arguments. Mathematical arguments actually should be preferred, and that's the point he makes with Galileo. But just to witness to the circulation of Calcagnini's work, even in Galileo's time. So what is the relevance of this work for the cosmological debates of the Renaissance? Some considerations on my part. First, I think it's a very interesting work to look for the establishment of commonplaces of what we could call Copernican commonplaces. The Earth-ship metaphor, which is of course elder than Calcagnini, but finds here expression in verses that are very famous and widespread. We find many standard arguments of the later debates: the Achilles argument, the Earth magnet metaphor, the sea tides argument. Then we have the establishment of certain authorities, especially ancient authorities. For instance, Hicetas, Timaeus, Virgil, as I already mentioned. And there is an issue, and also contemporary or more recent authorities. For instance, Calcagnini mentioned Cardinal Cusanus as an ally in the defense of the motion of the Earth. Then there is one more aspect that I'd like to stress, the aspect of style. And style is not just the humanistic style, but it's also a mindset. I think the work by Calcagnini helps us very much to understand the cultural mindset of an author like himself, but also of the culture that, of which Copernicus himself was imbued. It's marked by humanistic erudition and dialectic rather than mathematical deduction. I say dialectic because there is a way of presenting the arguments step by step that are very different from a deductive method. That's why there is openness and there is uncertainty about the interpretation of some crucial aspects, like the definition of the terrestrial motions. This work, Celio, is in my view a reservoir of images, references, arguments, very rich one, richer than many other sources of the same time. And as I already mentioned, I see that as a sort of open-ended project, and I think intentionally open-ended. So I think intentionally Calcagnini left certain aspects open and promised to keep them for orality or for further developments. Okay, thank you.
Grazie al professor Omodeo, soprattutto, anzi, prima per essere stato nei tempi, perfetto, quasi da cronometro, quindi il professor Bonoli è anche lui molto soddisfatto della presentazione. Grazie anche per l'intensa e bella presentazione che ci ha fatto di questo personaggio, sicuramente a me poco noto, non so quanto fosse noto alla platea, quindi sicuramente un argomento di forte interesse. Se c'è una, massimo mezza considerazione, la accettiamo molto volentieri.
Ok, grazie. Grazie Pietro per questa bellissima presentazione. Volevo soltanto osservare che quella frase di Virgilio effettivamente si presenta moltissime volte in alcuni testi, e oltre a Plero, se mi ricordo bene, ma volevo conferma da te, e mi sembra anche padre Foscarini la citi, è presente anche in diversi testi di gesuiti. Non so, a me ha dato l'impressione che fosse una sorta di frase in codice per come dire, dichiarare con molta prudenza un interesse per la visione copernicana anche negli ambienti religiosi, dove ovviamente in modo aperto queste dichiarazioni era bene non farle, perché direi che Andreas Taché la richiama, ma adesso in questo momento non l'ho presente, ma mi sembrano anche altri gesuiti. Volevo chiederti che cosa pensavi riguardo a questa ipotesi di codice,
sì,
no? Come
allora,
dire, seicentesco. Grazie.
Cioè, lo considero effettivamente un codice copernicano? Cioè nel 500 e nel 600 diventa una specie di frase segnaposto della teoria copernicana. Questa è una cosa di cui mi sono convinto nella frequentazione di fonti copernicane. Poi ritornando a Calcagnini ho trovato questo riferimento come punto iniziale di questa lunga tradizione, che poi non passa neanche più necessariamente per Calcagnini. Un'idea che stavo perseguendo era di cercare di ricostruire la circolazione di questa immagine, di questo verso virgiliano, come indice dell'influenza di Calcagnini nel dibattito cinque-seicentesco. Però poi alla fine diventa uno di quei terreni difficilmente, cioè scivolosi. Credo che l'ipotesi mi sento di presentarla, e condivido anche la tua idea di un codice, che è esattamente l'idea che ho anch'io, anche perché la si ritrova, no, in tutti gli autori principali. E anche quelli meno principali, e da lì a costruire poi un'interpretazione più forte bisogna spenderci tempo e riflessioni ulteriori.
Mi sembrava che era presente anche da qualche parte nel De Rerum Natura, sì. Un verso molto, non proprio formulato così, ma molto prossimo. Insomma, il De Rerum Natura è un altro testo che forse qualche problema nell'ambiente seicentesco post-tridentino poteva anche crearlo, insomma. Grazie.
Sì, allora molto velocemente, io di Calcagnini devo dire conoscevo solo il nome e il titolo dell'opera, quindi non i contenuti. La mia domanda sono due. Tu hai detto che il trattamento non è di tipo matematico. C'è almeno un abbozzo a una possibile matematica del moto diurno della Terra o no? Questa è la prima domanda. La seconda domanda è questa. Copernico non sviluppa una fisica celeste, però chiaramente si rende conto che per ammettere anche solo a livello cinematico il suo sistema, la fisica terrestre deve cambiare. E per esempio Calcagnini si occupa della maggiore obiezione che viene rivolta al moto della Terra, che a priori è anche ragionevole, cioè che se un grave cade da una torre non può cadere esattamente sulla perpendicolare. Se ne occupa di questo o no?
Allora, diciamo che lo stile è allusivo, però comunque dà tutti gli spunti per poi andare a cercare i riferimenti. Allora, per quanto riguarda la matematica o le geometrie astronomiche, allora, quello che fa lui allude per chi conosce la matematica e l'astronomia matematica del tempo, e lo fa con cognizione di causa. Lui conosceva bene l'astronomia, frequentava astronomi, corrispondeva con astronomi, quindi era perfettamente in grado di seguire e sviluppare un discorso matematico, almeno sugli aspetti fondamentali della sfera e della teoria planetaria del tempo. Quello che fa è di fare riferimento alle teorie astronomiche e tradurle in termini geocinetici, cioè vuol dire vabbè, la rotazione diurna, abbastanza semplice, no? Con l'argomento anche sulla base del verso virgiliano, lui sostiene che muovere la Terra ha tutta una serie di vantaggi, che vi dicevo, filosofico-naturali, e quindi è compatibile, no? Invertendo le parti. Quello che fa poi successivamente è di prendere altri fenomeni celesti e indicare il fatto che possono essere riportati al moto terrestre. Quindi, non so, parla mostrava il passo della trepidazio della sfera delle stelle, dice, non l'articola, non spiega come funziona la trepidazio, dice chiunque voglia vada a vedersi come funziona la trepidazio può essere e deve essere attribuita alla Terra. Il passo che per me era più intrigante alla fine è quello in cui sostiene che addirittura la teoria degli epicicli e dei deferenti debba e possa essere riportata in termini di moto terrestre, perché lì ci potrebbe essere un'apertura alle considerazioni eliocentriche che in quegli anni Copernico stava già presentando e rendendo note attraverso il commentario Iulus prima, i suoi corrispondenti, i suoi interlocutori. Però anche lì la matematica sta sullo sfondo. A buon intenditore, così come le citazioni letterarie, il buon intenditore capirà cosa intendo quando cito Mimnermo, qual è il riferimento virgiliano, eccetera, eccetera. Per quanto riguarda, e cerco di essere breve, per quanto riguarda la filosofia naturale, si spende sulla filosofia naturale, abbracciando una filosofia, diciamo, quella che chiamiamo vitalista, c'è un'anima mundi, c'è una teleologia nei processi naturali, si spende sul fatto che sia più naturale il moto circolare che non quello verticale. Quindi c'è quella stessa considerazione che si trova anche in Copernico, nel primo libro del De Revolutionibus, secondo cui il vero moto naturale è quello circolare e non quello verticale, che invece è un moto restaurativo. Quindi si trovano questi spunti. E poi altro. Ultima cosa, c'è un riferimento per esempio alla Terra come grande bilancia cosmologica, cosa che non ho detto, e considera come lo sbilanciamento possa produrre un moto, che è un'idea che si trova in molti altri autori, poi anche nel contesto copernicano. Lì fa riferimento a dei diagrammi geometrici che non ci sono, e quindi l'incubo del traduttore è di dover cercare di immaginarsi qual è questo diagramma assente che viene descritto nel testo.
Mentre porto il microfono al professor Bonoli, una suggestione, hai detto che Calcagnini parla del Sole come fuoco eterno, è un riferimento all'estia pitagorica o no?
Conosce il Timeo e conosce Aristotele, quindi diciamo conosce le fonti che ci riportano i pitagorici.
Ma lui lo richiama volontariamente oppure semplicemente un modo per identificare il Sole?
Sì, anche perché il Timeo è tra le fonti che Calcagnini menziona come solidali rispetto alla sua impostazione della realtà del moto terrestre.
A parte la curiosità, che forse è senz'altro una pura coincidenza, che il relatore della laurea di Calcagnini era lo stesso relatore della laurea di Copernico di una decina di anni precedenti, il giurista Leuti, ma probabilmente appunto è solo una coincidenza. La domanda che volevo farti invece è un'altra. Per coloro che intendevano come Calcagnini mettere in rotazione la Terra, ovviamente erano costretti a bloccare il moto diurno, cioè in 24 ore, dell'ottava sfera delle stelle. Se blocchi quel movimento non hai più bisogno del primo mobile, che era quello che con gli angeli meccanici, eccetera, eccetera, dava il movimento, e quindi nasceva un problema metafisico e addirittura teologico. Se non ho più bisogno del primo mobile, quello che ci sta dietro, cioè l'amor che muove il cielo e le altre stelle, serve ancora, e sarà poi uno dei problemi di Giordano Bruno e successivamente, ma è chiaro che da un punto di vista di chi si occupava come Calcagnini di mettere in movimento la Terra, questo problema nasceva subito. Ne parla Calcagnini o come Copernico fa finta di non affrontarlo? Perché sa che è un problema di una delicatezza incredibile.
Non affronta la questione teologica, ma affronta la spiegazione fisica, per così dire, tra di noi, e scomoda, come farà Giordano Bruno, l'anima mundi. Cioè scomoda il vitalismo. È l'idea platonica che i corpi e quelli celesti siano mossi dalla loro anima con una finalità teleologica, e quindi anziché la comunicazione dei moti della metafisica, della fisica aristotelica e della cosmologia aristotelica, si passa invece all'idea che ci sia un moto intrinseco e naturale agli enti naturali. Quindi il moto ab intrinseco anziché ab extrinseco. Sì, sì. Ci sono anche altri autori che lo fanno nel corso del Cinquecento. Ma anche geocentrici, per esempio Fracastoro, compiono un'operazione simile. Sì, scusate.
Sì, grazie Pietro. Volevo chiederti, hai menzionato l'idea di un contatto con Copernico, con le sue idee al matrimonio tra Sigismondo di Polonia e Bonasforza. Questa teoria è sostenuta da Birkenmeier, è quello che l'ha introdotta, ma poi ci sono state tante altre critiche successive. Personalmente tu cosa credi? Perché poi alla fine di coincidenze, ad esempio tipo quella che menzionata dal professor Bonoli, ce ne sono altre. Volevo menzionare per esempio il fatto che Ariosto nel Negromante cita Mastro Iachino, dice, lo paragona a come quegli astronomi che fanno girare la Terra praticamente a memoria, no? Quindi sembra che questa memoria è ricorrente sempre negli stessi ambienti. Tu personalmente volevo sapere che cosa pensi di un possibile contatto, magari attraverso una persona, un intermediario o diretto. Grazie.
Allora, il contatto diretto non lo posso stabilire, però indiretto io ne sono profondamente convinto. Però per sostenere questo tipo di argomento bisogna cambiare un po' la prospettiva di cosa sia l'evidenza di un contatto in contesti culturali e scientifici del passato, in particolare della prima età moderna. Penso che il contesto sia fondamentale per stabilire i contatti tra autori, persone, soprattutto che lavorano sugli stessi temi, soprattutto in un'epoca in cui la comunità scientifica e intellettuale è così ristretta. Il fatto che sia Calcagnini che Copernico siano legati alla Polonia, a Cracovia, a Ferrara, ai contesti umanistici italiani, rende l'onere della dimostrazione del non contatto dalla parte di chi lo nega e non da chi lo sostiene. È un po' come il contatto tra Copernico e Bruzzevo a Cracovia, che viene negato perché non c'è l'evidenza, ma erano entrambi a Cracovia negli stessi anni, avevano entrambi interesse dell'astronomia e così via. Quindi mi dovete dimostrare che Copernico non incontra il professore di astronomia a Cracovia, non viceversa. Concludo solo dicendo che se si prende la corrispondenza di Calcagnini, che non ho letto con attenzione perché è densissima, è lunghissima e complicata, però Calcagnini parla di tantissimi contesti europei del 400 e del 500 e lo fa descrivendo come va in queste città e prende contatto con tutte le personalità intellettuali del posto. Quando scrive riguardo a Roma, riguardo a Cracovia, riguardo a incontri, dice: quando sono arrivato in questa città, le persone interessanti in questo posto sono Tizio, Caio. Quindi mi sembra veramente strano che arrivando in Polonia, a Cracovia, nel 500, con gli interessi che ha, occupandosi di questi temi, non si sia andato a informare di chi sono gli astronomi, di chi sono le personalità interessanti, di quali sono le idee che circolano. Questo giusto per dire. Quindi io ne sono convinto, però ovviamente so che c'è sempre un margine di dubbio.